Okay, and today in this video we're going to be studying the evidence for Jesus' resurrection. Did he actually rise from the dead? I'm sure most of you think that Christians go on this by blind faith. A lot of you think that, it's just a legend that's been made up over the years. People have just come up with this legendary story that Jesus died and was resurrected from the dead. Yeah, so basically the whole of the Christian faith is held together on one single event, and that is Jesus rising from the dead. So if we can prove that to be factually true, then we can factually say that the whole Bible is true because that's what Jesus claims. Or if we can't prove that Jesus rose from the dead, then it's just blind faith and it's a little bit of a miserable religion that we can't really have much evidence to go by. Is there anything in history that we can use to actually prove that he did rise from the dead? The answer is yes. God has actually provided evidence to prove that Jesus did rise from the dead. So yeah, after this video you're going to realise that Jesus actually did literally rise from the dead. Okay, enjoy.
Was Jesus dead on the cross? Yes. Yes, he was. Virtually every scholar on the planet can see that Jesus was dead after the crucifixion. We have no record of anyone anywhere ever surviving a full Roman crucifixion. Even the Journal of the American Medical Association published a pre-reviewed scientific medical study of the evidence for the death of Jesus and said clearly the weight of the evidence indicates that Jesus was dead even before the wound to his side was inflicted. Even the atheist New Testament scholar Gerd Ludemann said, historically, it's indisputable that Jesus was dead, so Jesus was dead.
Historical evidence for the resurrection. The historical evidence for the resurrection of Christ is very good. Scholars such as William Lane Craig, J.P. Moreland, Gary Habermas, and others have done an especially good job of detailing that evidence. It is the aim of this study to offer a sort of synthesis of some of their key points and to show the strength of the historical evidence for the resurrection of Christ. A method commonly used today to determine the historicity of an event is inference to the best explanation. William Lane Craig describes this as an approach where we begin with the evidence available to us and then infer what would, if true, provide the best explanation of that evidence. In other words, we ought to accept an event as historical if it gives the best explanation for the evidence surrounding it. When we look at the evidence, the truth of the resurrection emerges very clearly as the best explanation. There is no other theory that can even come close to accounting for the evidence. Therefore, there is solid historical grounds for the truth that Jesus Christ rose from the dead. Whilst doing this study, we don't need to assume that the Bible is inspired by God or even trustworthy. Even though I do believe these things, it's not necessary because the evidence I'm about to provide proves that Jesus rose from the dead without believing he is God. There are three truths that even critical atheist scholars admit. In other words, these three truths are so strong that they are accepted by serious historians of all stripes. Therefore, any theory must be able to adequately account for these three truths, which are: 1. The tomb in which Jesus was buried was discovered empty by a group of women on the Sunday following the crucifixion. 2. Jesus' disciples had real experiences with the one whom they believed was the risen Christ. And 3. As a result of the preaching of these disciples, which had the resurrection at its centre, the Christian church was established and grew. Virtually all scholars accept these as facts. These three facts create a strongly woven three-cord rope that cannot be broken. 1. The empty tomb. The resurrection was preached in the same city where Jesus had been buried. The disciples did not go to some obscure place where no one had heard of Jesus, but instead began preaching in Jerusalem, where everyone knew Jesus was crucified. They could not have done this if Jesus was still in the tomb. No one would have believed them. The resurrection proclamation could not have been maintained in Jerusalem for a single day, for a single hour, if the tomb was not established as a fact to be empty. 2. The Jews who had Jesus killed made a false claim that the body of Jesus was stolen, so it is pretty well established that the early Jews admitted the tomb was empty.
Third category of evidence is the empty tomb. And the best evidence for that is even the opponents of Jesus implicitly admitted the tomb was empty. Because when the disciples began proclaiming that Jesus had risen, what the opponents said was, the disciples stole the body. Now they're conceding the tomb's empty, they're just trying to explain how it got empty. So everybody's conceding the tomb was empty. How did it get empty is really the issue.
The Jewish leaders were opposed to Christianity. They were hostile witnesses in acknowledging the empty tomb. They were admitting the reality of a fact that was certainly not in their favour. 3. The Gospel of Mark was recorded too early to be legendary. 4. The empty tomb is supported by the historical reliability of the burial story. NT scholars agree that the burial story is one of the best established facts about Jesus. One reason for this is because of the inclusion of Joseph of Arimathea as the one who buried Christ. Joseph was a member of the Jewish Sanhedrin, a sort of Jewish Supreme Court. People on this ruling class were simply too well known for false stories about them to be pulled off in this way. This would have exposed Christians as frauds, so they couldn't have circulated a story about him burying Jesus unless it was true. But how does the reliability of Jesus' burial argue that the tomb was empty? Because the burial account and empty tomb account have ties indicating that they are one continuous account. So if the burial account is accurate, then the empty tomb account is likely to be accurate as well. 5. The tomb was discovered by women. Why is this important? Because the testimony of women in the first century Jewish culture was considered worthless. So if the empty tomb story were a legend, then it is most likely that the male disciples would have been made the first to discover the empty tomb. The fact that despised women whose testimony was deemed worthless were the chief witness to the fact that the tomb was empty can only be plausible explained if, like it or not, they actually were the discoverers of the empty tomb. Because of the strong evidence for the empty tomb, most recent scholars do not deny it. D.H. Van Dalen has said, "It is extremely difficult to object to the empty tomb on historical grounds. Those who deny it do so on the basis of theological or philosophical assumptions." Stolen body theory. Theories such as the Jews or Romans had no motives to steal the body because they both wanted to suppress Christianity, not encourage it by providing it with an empty tomb. Roman guards, soldiers, also were guarding the tomb. The disciples would have no motive either because of their preaching on the resurrection. They were beaten, killed and persecuted. Why would they go through all of this for a deliberate lie? No serious scholars hold to any of these theories today. What explanation, then, do the critics offer, may you ask? They are self-confessedly without any explanation to offer. There is simply no plausible natural explanation today to account for Jesus' tomb being empty. If we deny the resurrection of Jesus, we are left with an inexplicable mystery. The resurrection of Jesus is not just the best explanation for the empty tomb, it is the only explanation in town. So that's the empty tomb fact covered. We're going now on to Jesus' disciples had real experiences with the one whom they believed was the risen Christ.